I'm going to begin, Bill, by just starting with, I mean, you get to really ham it up with this role. That must have been quite good fun playing a character of this nature.
Yeah, it's a great part, and I get to play the part that he's playing in the film that we're making, in the film that you're watching, so it's extra good value.
And have you ever encountered many people like Ambrose Hilliard before in the industry today, or is he very much a product of a sort of bygone era of film production?
I don't know, because I wasn't there, but in my experience, no, I don't know anybody like Ambrose Hilliard.
I mean, you seem to be a real kind of perfect fit for this part, because you've always, across your career, walked this perfect kind of line between comedy and pathos, and that's what this film does so perfectly. I mean, were you ever quite initially kind of apprehensive about that, in the sense that with this movie, that you, particularly your character, you've got some of the more comedic scenes, but there's also some of the hardest to watch. I mean, particularly the identifying of a body scene, which is obviously very difficult. So when you first got involved, was there ever kind of any worries that tonally it'd be quite a difficult one to get right?
Well, I always worry, because I just worry, but not any more than anything else. I mean, I didn't worry about the combination of those two elements. I didn't worry about because the writing is so good that it supports you wherever you go, and also Lona was very good at scheduling that information. So we were covered, I think it's more difficult for the audience to deal with those things than it was for the actors.
I mean, because the film really balances that kind of harsh severity of war with actually quite a light touch. It really thrives in that community spirit that existed at the time.
Yeah.
It's quite unique, isn't it, I suppose, to look at the UK in that regard? Because often when we deal with war movies, we're very much looking at it from a kind of soldier's perspective, and it's all very tragic. But this actually kind of this reminds us that actually the country really kind of came together at that time.
Yeah, it's a great example of how people can combine with courage and compassion during dangerous times, and they can focus on that which unifies them rather than that which divides them. We're always being manipulated to focus on the divisions for, political purposes, but it's good to see that in a real time of danger, people can conduct themselves in such a way.
I mean, in that regard, do you think it's quite an important time for this film to be released? Obviously, with the Brexit vote and stuff in the country kind of at loggerheads, a reminder that when people kind of, I don't know, when everyone comes together and sort of collaborates. I
think the fact that people have a nostalgia for that period, which was a brutal time, and you didn't know which part of the city would be left standing or who would be around the following day. I think that is a kind of yearning for a simplified life, as you suggest, when people were unified by a single source of danger, and that the usual static and the conflicts and the divisions were unplugged for a while. And I think people yearn for that, because people are drawn, I think they are naturally drawn to one another. In other words, they would embrace one another. They are, as I say, they are manipulated to do the other thing because of toxic vested interests.
I mean, it's a real kind of fascinating exploration of British cinema from this period. How important was Stephen Woolley in that regard? Because he's like an encyclopedic knowledge of that period.
Stephen Woolley, the great English producer who produced this movie along with Amanda Posey, is encyclopedic, as you say, about British movies generally, and particularly from that period. He knows everything. It's like, what did you do with the rest of your life, Stephen? But he's also passionate about them, and as you may know, he's curated, to combine with the opening of this movie, he's curated a festival of these films, particularly specifically the ones that deal with women in the war, which will be shown concurrently with the opening of the film at the BFI. So there'll be, I think, 20 movies that you can see at the British Film Institute on the South Bank in the next coming weeks.
Just to find, I mean, we speak about Hilliard in the movie, so you talk about Hilliard, this franchise that he's kind of involved in. I was wondering, I mean, obviously it's discussed a couple of times, it's mentioned, but did you actually think about it? Did you kind of picture this kind of the other movies from his career and other kind of films he would have made?
Well, we had a very funny afternoon where we had to do pretend stills from some of those movies. He's like a B movie star. I used to like the B movies. When I was a kid, you'd have a double bill. You'd always have a double bill. And so you'd have the B movie and then the main event. And often the B movies were more interesting than the main event. And I liked the idea of those kind of, that status of a sort of B movie star. Yeah, I mean, and I did very silly stills of me smoking pipes and, looking, trying to look moody like a detective.
I'm just hoping now we get a spin-off of him in it.
Yeah, it'd be good, wouldn't it?
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey You